Hello, everyone. Hello, everybody, and hopefully you guys are doing well out there. Today, we are going to be diving into Thomas's live reaction. Let me just fire up everything. I've been in meetings, and so like the day has definitely run way closer into everything we're functioning on. So yeah, boom. We just welcome everybody in. Thanks so much for being here early for the most part. It looks like we got a couple people here, which is great. I'm very curious about to see what kind of questions and answers that that Thomas rocks and rolls with. Let me fire back up this other view. And go to restream. I can make sure I can see all the chat. Make sure everything is in fact working as expected. Let's see here. All right. There we go. We are rocking and rolling, firing on all cylinders. Kids crying in the background. Welcome to the hut. All right, cool. So in terms of just I think what we're going to see a little bit here today, guys, is that we'll probably end up seeing some questions and things like that that have already been asked and answered, and I think that's going to be fun. I think that's just normal as a part of it. You know, generally, you know, not everybody follows every single update, so there's got to be questions that we might all hear and see that have been asked. But I think overall the hope is that this event is both for the community itself, but also able to go a little bit further and wider in the long run of everything. We'll just chat over in the official Twitch chat. They are apparently giving away keys and stuff like that, so just be sure, out of water here, to be following the official Moon Studios. The top link in the description will get you over there if you're, especially if you're watching this after the fact in a VOD form and you don't want to hear my commentary and thoughts on the process this entire time. Feel free to just go check it out, the official channels. That's perfectly fine as well. Elmy Soft says hi there. Please, if you see fit and possible, ask Thomas on Ori 3. To be clear, Thomas has already received all of these questions. He is going to spend a little bit of time with us answering them, and he might do some live stuff. We will see. We will see. And then I got a notification. I see all the cool things. Kevin, thanks so much for the follow here on YouTube. All right. Might turn on some background music for everybody as we wait. Been listening to Vanadil and Shield, but I think some of that might end up being copyright strike. At least that's what we're currently appealing as fair use. Let's see here. Dream beats. Perfect. There we go. Little background music for us. Let's see here. Howdy. All right, they say officially kicks off at 1. Last time they did a live event, you know, didn't exactly start at 1. Boom City. But yeah, so Elmisoft, basically what was the last known thing we've seen on Ori 3 is Microsoft has continued to ask them. They have meetings talking about Ori 3, but Thomas has continually told Microsoft that the No Rest for the Wicked, that is their current priority. That's what they're going to keep focusing in on. So it might be a little bit more time, essentially, before we hear any news on that. However, I will continue to maintain there is a check big enough that would get Microsoft, that could make it happen, right? But then you got to think of, obviously, like, is Thomas splitting his goals, or is he able to, you know, have a team that's able to really kind of lead and push through what Ori 3 would be and look like, you know? Hey, no problem, man. Yeah, if you have any other questions, because like the other things they've talked about is people on the team, and who knows, maybe Toys for Bob would do something like this, but he's had people on his own team express they would love to tackle the next Banjo game. And I know there's like, especially after Astrobot, after Donkey Kong, after Mario, like Come on, man. Let's make it happen. Like, let's make it happen. I'm loving the new Donkey Kong game. I've been enjoying hanging out with the kids playing that. It's very satisfying to smash things. And I'd love to see a new Banjo. Honestly, like, oddly enough, I've never sat down and played the Ori series, but based off of just how much I love this game, I need to find some mythical, magical time that doesn't exist for me right now and make that actually happen. Yeah. That's a notification. Why did I not see the... All right, a delayed notification? Strange. I gotta figure out my alerts, guys. I've been kind of doing this transition with the podcast and the rebranding there, and then working on getting all this set up. And I was using a service, and then they ended up adding in like a subscription, and all of a sudden, like, I was trying to stream and nothing looked good, nothing would work. I was like, all right. So I'm using Restream.io, and that, you know, is a paid service, but it's one that I like. It gives me a lot of strength and flexibility to use. And so you can see here, like, yeah, notifications, layouts, things like that I need to kind of focus in on. Postum says, oh, Banjo 3, if done right, would be incredible. That's a big if, though. I think it could, like, if done right, you know, one of the things that I think is just ultimately very humorous is that, like, Xbox, I think, gets a lot of hate. I think there's a you know, kind of disposition towards PlayStation as a brand. Clearly, they, you know, have the games and the numbers and things like that. So none of this is derogatory towards their success. However, Banjo 3E on all platforms, I think that would be great. I think a lot of people will resonate with that. I think the fact that the Xbox games are dominating in, like, they have 60% or more in the top 10 games on PlayStation or Microsoft games. Okay, cool. I think Banjo would be up there. And I think essentially that when it comes to game of the year, you might see some of those games actually become more, you know, inclined to be nominated as opposed to, like, yeah. But again, Microsoft focuses more on, I guess, like, I've always kind of viewed Microsoft like in a heavier focus on multiplayer. Obviously, games as a service, they have one of the biggest ones with Minecraft. Yeah, I'm sure they would love to own like Fortnite and whatnot, but Thomas could be louder. Is he live? Let me refresh. It's 104. There he goes.
Looks like you're still a little too low.
Cool.
When you're not talking directly into the mic or something.
He's live now.
Audio, I have the mic right in front of my face. And let me check settings here real quick again. Right. Everything is super high. I can maybe add to this. Maybe the wicked audio is overriding it a bit. So let's check this. Will not customize. We'll create a new realm.
Yeah, let's go, baby. Let me adjust this layout just a little bit.
All right. I think we'll skip the prologue for now. I think you guys have all seen the tutorial and so on. For the path, we'll just do normal for now. Or what do people want to see? Want to see me playing something different?
There are some people who wanted to see you play hardcore.
Play hardcore? We could do that. But that could mean that we have to... that I might die somewhere and then we have to start all over again. Frankly, I have to answer questions and so on at the same time. That's already pretty hard, so I'll just do a normal run for now. And let's take it from there. We'll just create realm and we'll go. So guys, the format of this, as far as I understand, is that I'll just play and we have some questions prepared already. We asked on the Discord what people want to know and so on. The idea is that Chris is, you know, while I'm playing, is also asking these questions so you guys get your answers and so on. And yeah, we're also looking at the chat and ask for, yeah, you can ask for anything, right? And we'll try to answer as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, we'll also dedicate some time towards the end for specifically like Twitch chat questions. So save your questions in chat for then if you really want it to be answered. But also, if you want to make sure that your question is asked the next time around, make sure to join our Discord because that's where we collect the questions from for these streams.
Can we play more Explorer type or just Rush? How do people feel about that? And Chris, it might be good if you just keep me updated on what the chat says because it's a bit difficult to follow.
It is hard, especially he's got like almost 900 people watching him,
Yeah,
so it's
I'll
like
link
it goes
I'll
pretty
link the Discord
fast.
to you guys, if I can hear.
All right. I'm already grabbing some wood. It's good at the start. Let's do that.
Where did he get? I didn't see him pick up an axe. I guess he got one. Started getting that experience, baby. How much does he get? So he's at
Should we rush
7.
it, or should we kind of like take our time?
8, 9. Okay.
Looks like Explorer is the overwhelming yes right now.
So just play cool. Okay. So we'll jump through this stuff. Doom-de-doom-de-doom. How's the video quality and everything? Does this all feel okay to everybody?
Oh, for sure, piano player. 100%. 100%.
Audio, video, and everything works so that we just have everything balanced properly.
If you want to go, if you're on Twitch, piano player, just go and drop
Sounds
that
like
in the
all good.
hit the top link and go.
Sounds
Feel free to drop that over on his Twitch chat. Boom shakalaka.
not the best at.
Koji says, "Is there a date we can expect multiplayer?" We'll see what he says. But
we have that implemented.
I think essentially you're looking at 6 to 8 weeks from now.
Like it, love it, love it. That's good. I think I still would like to see a bar. How do people feel about a bar where you would actually see more of a visual thing of like, hey, press it at this time? Because obviously we've been discussing that, and it always came up, right? But at the same time, we thought it would be pretty clear, like, hey, you have to hit the thing when the tool hits the resource. So not sure.
How do you guys think about a bar? Like, I honestly don't know how I feel about that because
Hunter's knife.
I feel it's kind of more immersive the way it is.
What do we want to play with? Staff. We'll do the knife for now. Chris, you guys picked out like 50 questions or so. In the interest of time, we should probably start going through some of these already, so we can actually go through all of them.
Let's go with the
Let's do it.
top most upvoted one to start.
Hey, what's up, dude?
This is going to be an interesting one already. What are the long-term ambitions for No Rest of the Wicked post 1.0? Is it going to be treated as a live service game like Path of Exile, or more like something with Grim Dawn where it's just expansion DLC?
Well, basically, we have a game where we don't want to really like heavily finance it through microtransactions and so on, right?
Correct.
So a lot of times at the forum and so on, I see people bring up CCUs and so on. We're not that worried about that. Like the thing that worries us is just, you know, do we reach enough players, right? That kind of thing. And so our goal is more, you know, think Destiny and so on, right? That we will have a bigger expansion every now and then, right? But instead of like nickel and diming people with like, hey, you know what we need to come up with? A $60 horse skin, right? Instead, we'll just make it very fair and say, hey, we've been working on all this crazy content and everything, and that's what we're monetizing, right? That it is just basically a fair thing. I think also people wouldn't let us get away with any of the crazy shit, right? Because we're Moon Studios, we always kind of like had the idea of like making games from gamers for gamers, right? And I've been actually surprised recently because we did get, for the very first time, some negative responses from people that want us to implement microtransactions. So it feels a little bit like Pizarro World, but that's the overall, like, to answer the question,
strange.
that's the overall idea, that we just finance basically through bigger expansions and so on. It's a little bit more of the traditional model.
So in that mind, it sounds like they're really going with the expansion model, right? Like which we've known, meaning we don't know the cadence,
that's the
but
fairest thing to do.
I wonder how often they'll
You know,
think about
so
doing
that
an
it's just
expansion.
more
Once a year,
games
guy.
that
What do y'all
are
think?
timed and like, hey, here you're playing this epic fantasy thing. How about you flash your credit card, right? That it's just a very fair thing of like, hey, every year, Christmas time or something, you get excited about the big new thing that Moon Studios will release. That seems decent to me.
Sounds like he almost confirmed like every year.
Audio is hitting twice.
With
Can
us?
you mute the Wicked Audio one? I think it's because we also have desktop audio on right now. So we probably just need to mute the Wicked Audio track.
Okay. Let me check if that's better. I made the change.
Let us know if it's still happening. Okay, it looks like it's good.
Perfect. Good. What was the second question we had?
Okay, so second one, looks like this one's specifically for co-op. Will it function more like an MMO with players being able to play on their own in the same world, or more like Dark Souls with players only being able to like play together when the host is online and stuff?
Neither. So basically, I mean, with Wicked, we wanted, and by the way, guys, excuse me if I'm sometimes, if it's a little bit weird, right? Because like playing and talking at the same time and so on can be quite difficult. But neither. Basically, we're trying to kind of like be in the middle. Meaning, if you look at the experiences that we've seen so far, right? I think we're in an interesting spot in terms of multiplayer. Meaning, you have on the one side the stuff that Diablo always did and Dark Souls always did, which means you created a realm, right, a server, and then you temporarily invited a guest. That was the one thing, right? And to me, that particular approach always felt like, I never really felt like, hey, I'm building something together with a party, right, of folks and so on. I always very much had that feeling of like, hey, I'm just inviting temporary guests. And I mean, that's very much how, for example, in Souls games, it's set up as well, right? Where literally, hey, you invite a guest, and then even after a boss battle and so on, you get kicked out, right? With the Diablo games, it was a little bit different, but it always just felt like, hey, everybody has their own save game, and then we just do temporary guest stuff, right? And then on the opposite side of that, you had the MMOs, where the whole idea was, well, you're basically playing with 10,000 people on a server.
Always online.
And I think both of them have some negatives. To me, the negative for the Diablo side and so on would be that that community feeling doesn't really happen, right? I remember being a kid and playing Secret of Mana,
dude.
right? And those kind of things. So like the first time Ultima Online came out, right? And so on. Like, and those were kind of like magical experiences for me. So I'm trying to replicate that it really feels like, hey, with a party, we're building something together. That's a huge reason why Sacrament exists, right? That really, and you know, with more and more upgrades and so on. I think we will get more and more of that feeling of like, hey, really building something with your friends, making it feel almost like a D&D session, right? That kind of thing. And on the MMO side, we always had the problem of, well, cool, there's 10,000 people on the server, which basically turns you into a passive pawn, right? Because you have the problem of, hey, if one person kills Arthas respawns 2 minutes later. You can't affect the world in a game where 10,000 other people are playing, otherwise you're basically ruining the game for everybody else, right? I don't even think design-wise that was solved by phasing or so on. That's just a base problem that you can't solve, right? So with Wicked, our design idea, like the direction was always, hey, we want the best of both worlds. We want people to kind of like really share a realm together, and allow them to really feel to have agency basically over the world, right? And obviously with that also there will be some downsides, meaning that some people might not like that other people can push a story event forward or those kind of things, right? But what we are going for is we want to just give the agency to the player and just ensure that, hey, it really feels like you're sharing a game together, right? Like really you're building something together and so on, right? So with the MMO thing, the thing that always bothered me is just the whole thing of but it feels like being in a theme park, right? And the world can never change. Meanwhile, what we always wanted is somebody does something on the realm, right? And hey, the townspeople now talk about it. they might just build you a statue and so on, those kind of things, right? I think with the setup that we have, that we can accomplish that finally. That you share a realm together and get that community feeling, that you get that thing. I just recently played a co-op session with Patrick, for example, one of our programmers. And you do get those things in Wicked where it's just, hey, I play and then somebody plays longer and I wake up in the morning and I see what he already did and we share our stuff in the community chest and that kind of thing. That there's really a feeling of like, hey, we are building something and doing something together. That is our approach. Yeah, there is no host basically. I'm just checking the chat real quick.
I do wonder if there's maybe a cost. Like, what's that cost to them?
Built everything on a really modern networking foundation, and the idea is, well, we basically host the realms, right? We host the servers,
right?
And even if the host goes offline, there isn't really a host, right? Like everybody else will be able to keep playing. So that's the magic of it. I think it'll be quite interesting once people get to try it, because it's so different than most of the things that I played, and that's currently what we're sitting on, by the way.
I think that's gonna lead to their need to release an expansion once a year.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Think of it kind of like Minecraft worlds. You know, like there's like one created, but anyone can hop on it at any time. The only difference
pay
is
for
that
those.
everybody who's a citizen of the realm will be able to modify realm settings and stuff. And there'll be like voting systems and stuff like
That's
that.
exactly right. So what that also means is that people have to be careful with who they invite, right? Like it's the same as in Minecraft, where it's like, hey, you might invite someone who destroys your stuff and so on, right? So you want to be careful. You want to play it with friends, family, people you trust, right? Because otherwise they might just play in a way that is not fun for you and so on, right? So you have to be careful who you share your realm with. Man, I'm exploring a lot here.
All right, it looks like there's kind of a extension to the co-op question for the next highest upvoted
Yes,
one.
co-op, come on.
How will the reward system work in co-op? So things like missions, chests, hunts, will each character get their own reward, or is it going to be shared with others where you have to like, you know, each kind of like trade with each other and stuff?
Yeah, obviously we had a lot of discussions about that. The way it works right now is first come, first serve. And some people might, you know, I know this will be contentious to some people. But to some degree, we want that conflict between players. We want players to kind of like have these moments of like, hey, we did something great together and some valuable loot dropped, right? And now people have to have a discussion. So we actually, I'll share you a little secret. Like we actually started the whole thing with shared loot, meaning that one person opens a chest and can take all the loot out of it. And then the next person comes and takes all the loot out of it. Then the next person comes and blah blah blah, right? And then that was true for every single chest and loot drop and everything. Why I already grabbed this. And to us, that just didn't feel that great, right? Like we, in many ways, we want that conflict. There's also in co-op, there's friendly fire, because we don't want that Suma gameplay. And there are some people who are already afraid that. Because most ARPGs fall into this trap of, hey, at first the combat is very methodical, right, and strategic, and then in Endgame it just becomes everything explodes, right? And we very much don't want that. That's why we have an animation commit combat system and all those things. Oh, poor Fillmore. Let's save him real quick. Sorry, I don't want to die immediately, so I'll have to focus for a second.
You think the game is suffering from feature creep? I don't think so yet, but it definitely can run the risk of that. I think whenever devs like Thomas talk, and you see it for me as well, like they have a full vision in their head, and so they communicate things, and it's like, oh yeah, it's gonna be nice. We thought about this. We talked about this.
Where was
I? Co-op rewards.
Oh yeah, and then yeah, so that's basically how we set it up, right? Because in terms of design, in many ways, we want that conflict. We want people to basically fight over the loot that they get and so on, right? And really feel like, hey, something like things are still valuable. If we would go with the shared loot thing, obviously also the other design issue that we'd have is just how does that affect the economy on the realm? Because we'd multiply the amount of items that we have and so on. And we don't really want that. We want it to be an experience where people really feel like, hey, everything is valuable, you know, and you really care about the items that you're grabbing and so on. There's definitely a lot of work that we're doing and looking into right now in terms of, oh, let's grab this stuff up here. In terms of just how much loot, like what's the right loot values to give out, right? Like, so how much loot is the player, like are people getting when you're just playing with one player? How much loot are we getting when 2 players are playing and 3 players and 4 players and so on, right? But that's the idea. Right now it's all set to first come, first serve. How do people react to this in chat? Because like that is probably be a little bit contentious at start. Until people actually try it and play it.
So no one's absolutely hating on it, which is good.
Well, that's a start.
Yeah, especially the fact that we want to have like trading and social kind of elements to the co-op gameplay. It really helps that kind of stuff. Like when Thomas mentioned that we had like loot that everybody can pick up from every single chest. It was very much just people could just run around and like there was no consequences, right? Everybody could just pick up every chest and it was fine. People weren't really encouraged to play together in that way.
That's exactly it. I think with, like, in general, what we're trying with the multiplayer is creating an experience where people really consciously have to think about what they're doing, right? Instead of it just becoming button mashing, right? And just, hey, you don't play consciously anymore, you're just going through it and like just pressing buttons and everything explodes and that kind of thing, right? That's very much our design philosophy. Why don't I have a pickaxe yet? Didn't I pick it up? That's crazy. Oh, I just didn't equip it. Yeah, sorry folks, you probably will not see me at my best in terms of playing, because it is quite difficult. It is also the first time I'm playing on stream like this, but it is often quite difficult to play and discuss things and so on at the same time. Let me actually share a little tidbit of something that we're trying right now. And I would love to know how people feel about that. So right now we have a separate button for parry. On a controller, I'm playing on a controller right now, it's LT or L2, so the left trigger. One thing I'm actually playing around with right now is that we merge that together with blocking. Meaning, if you press the block button, you do the, like, if you tap it, if you press and immediately release, you do a parry, versus, and then if you hold it, you block. And to me, that feels pretty good, what we have. But I would love to know what people think about this. Because it does...
Oh, I love it.
Yes.
Okay, because the thinking behind it is, I mean, we just want to streamline when streamlining makes sense, right? And right now, if I look at this, right, there's really no reason why, you know, we have yet another button. And that beautiful thing of that is, well, it frees up LT for other things, right? Even for the keyboard, having less buttons and having more contextual actions and so on just makes a ton of sense. Like, you'll do less piano stuff and more muscle memory. Oh, and let me ask here. I think some people probably saw that I've also been screwing around with third-person camera. How did people react to that? Let's just see here if people saw those videos and so on. Yeah, we also tried double tap. It doesn't feel quite as good as just having it tap release and hold to block. Man, there's so many people in the chat, it's kind of hard to follow.
It looks like a mix of like people liking top down and third person, but even
it might be a little bit strange, right, for people, because it's like, hey, Wicked has been built as a top down game. Everything we laid out as top down, right? And literally this was caused by us exploding our builds for some time, right? And I couldn't kind of like test my stuff, and then I just wanted to see it and coded something up for whatever, half a day, like in my morning, right? And I was just shocked how well it played, which doesn't happen that often in development, that it's like, hey, you try something and you're almost sure that it's not gonna, feel right, and then you're just, oh my god, that is crazy, right? But I don't know that many top-down ARPGs that would do that. So might be strange to people, but I kind of feel like, hey, if it works, if it feels fun, then might as well do it, right? Because some people, I mean, I saw Asmongold stream, for example, and he definitely also said that he loves the immersion of it, right? And there is something interesting. Like, I had a couple of our developers try it, and they made the same comment that it's interesting. Obviously, the tuning is not quite there yet. Like, I still have quite a lot to polish on that front. But once you play third person for like, half an hour or so, and then you switch back to top down, it kind of felt static to them, right? So to me, it's just an optional fun thing to try, right? Because it's just such an interesting thing to see the world from such a different angle, and it gives you these vistas all the time, right? Like, I was kind of like, holy crap, once I entered Sacrament and turned on third person and saw the whole town in like all 3D, and
it's cool
being able to walk around kind of like in the more immersive 3D view. So might be fun for people to play around with it.
Ooh, dual wield. That's a good question in the push chat.
Another question. This one's the next highest upvoted. Have you guys ever thought about implementing a drop system like Titan's Quest, where the enemy actually wears the item it's gonna drop? So basically, less random loot for maybe elite enemies.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, we discussed this a lot, and we tried it as well, right? We did have a lot of loot tables where the enemies just drop the stuff that is on them. The problem that we saw was that it wasn't actually that fun, right? Because we also have the factions and so on. So if an area is taken over by the Knights of 10th and so on, then literally you got lots of Knights of 10th tents all the time, and that just didn't feel that amazing, right? Like, you always want, when you defeat an enemy, right, to have that short moment of like, well, I don't know what I'm gonna get, right? And frankly, like, I'll be completely honest, we just had lots of systems calls about how to make the loot system even deeper, how to make it more fun, and ultimately that's always the goal, right? Whenever you, right, it's really hard to play and talk at the same time, but that's ultimately the goal, that when you just hope for the best every time you defeat an enemy, right? And then it could drop some random stuff and so on. That's the idea. That just felt the best to us. That's why we're doing that. Obviously, there are some exceptions, right? Like, so with certain enemies, you want to drop the stuff that is assigned to them. Like, if you kill a wolf, then yes, obviously it will drop wolf pelts and, wolf claws and that kind of thing. But so in general, we're just always playing the game and trying to perfect and trying to basically stick with the thing that is the most fun. And in that case, it was that, like, the random loot just felt a lot more satisfying, because you would still get these kind of like, oh yeah, that material, that's exactly what I needed for the second upgrade, and so on. Those kind of moments.
Oh, dude, the full release raw is going to be amazing.
I really love our level design. All the kind of like, little paths and so on. Like, we spent so much resources on level design. If people want to know, typical level at Moon, like something, an area like what we just shipped with Lowland Meadows and Marine Woods and so on, we spent a crazy amount of time on these, right? Like, we play them again and again and again, and in terms of resources and so on, a level in production is usually like 6 to 8 months or so. It's quite some time. The nice thing that helps us is that a lot of that, like, it's not 6 to 8 months on a straight thing. A lot of the the work regarding blockouts and so on, and doing just the figuring out the design and so on, we already did during pre-production and so on, right? So right now we are in the state of just we have a lot of people just already working on all the 1.0 content, and so we're obviously not starting from scratch on that, right? But there is a lot that goes into crafting levels. But then it's such a nice feeling, like once the levels are done and set dressed and everything is lit and so on, it's just really nice. I always loved and appreciated kind of like level design, like what Nintendo does in Zelda and so on. Yeah, we already got 2 purples. We should use
Super
those.
lucky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
I saw someone mention this, so I'm gonna answer it here. And I think there's quite a few people who've been asking about this, but we are actively working on getting the game to DirectX 12 and potentially Vulkan. It's
Nice.
a Unity thing, as many people already know. But we're actively working on it right now, and we're hoping to get it to you guys like as soon as possible, basically. But yeah, like there's a lot of good stuff that comes with it. We get to upgrade our FSR to the latest, and you get all the benefits out of DLSS 4, which we already currently have.
Frame gem and everything, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we don't have an exact like estimated date yet, but as soon as we do, we'll make sure to announce it to you guys.
Oh my god, that made me heavy. I don't like being heavy. So let's switch back for now.
I like the heavy in the game because you get that shoulder tackle charge.
Actually, I'm still heavy. No, I'm good. Which do we have the next question? Because you crazy people wrote up like 50 or so. I think
Actually,
the
I think
stream is
we're
planned for like 1.5 hours. I think we'll probably need more time than that.
I think we already got like I think 400 total. We were only able to approve about 100, and then about 50 got selected out of that. Yeah, everybody went crazy as soon as we asked. So actually, this one is I think a pretty big one. I saw a few people asking in chat already for this one as well. Can you share some information on what type of endgame activities you want to add in the future aside from Crucible, and like what the vision for endgame kind of is?
Yeah, I mean, so endgame in general, obviously it's incredibly important. It's also not been the highest priority thing, obviously, for our early access, right? For early access, we wanted to make sure that we hit all the bases, right? But the idea has always been with Wicked that by the time you finish the campaign, that you still feel like, oh, I've seen like maybe 30-40% of the game. So there's a lot of plans that we have.
Windows XP, thanks for the follow.
A shame if something would happen to her. That's always been the plan. But the thing that we want to do with Wicked is that the endgame should not resolve around just one thing, right? That's what I see in a lot of ARPGs. And frankly, like obviously our endgame right now isn't where we want it to be, right? We're in early access right now. There is a bit of stuff that we teased, but it's not final yet, right? But the thing that I see in other ARPGs that bugs me a bit is the whole thing of like it often becomes about one thing, right? Like, oh, every day I spend my time just doing rifts or that kind of thing. And the thing that I always loved, and I did this trick on Ori as well, right? Is that to keep players entertained, with Ori, I consciously designed the map so that we don't repeat ourselves too much. You see that in games like Uncharted and so on as well, right? Where if you look at the game and the segments, you very rarely have A. You always have like A, B, C, D, and then back to A, right? Meaning, oh, this area, this little stretch here is about combat. Then this next one is about platforming. Then this next one is about doing a puzzle. Then this next one is a story thing. And then you can come back to combat and so on, right? And what that does in terms of design is that it doesn't make you become tired, right? And you kind of like want to see, okay, what's the next thing? Okay, what's the next thing? Okay, what's the next thing, right? Because if repetition usually makes us get bored. And so with our endgame, I would want that to be multiple modes, right? I'd want that to be multiple things. Obviously, Crucible will be one of them. Obviously, the plague system will be that, right? But I would also want to do that purely in terms of like itemization or housing or those kind of things, right? That these systems are deep enough so that ultimately, when you spend your time in the Solar Sacra, that the game always pulls you into multiple directions, right? And that you always have, hey, I could do this, but also I want to do this. Oh, I haven't finished that yet, right? And I should do more of that stuff and so on. Another thing, by the way, that I think we are not doing really well is making it very clear what you get from what. That's something that we also discussed yesterday in our systems sync, that there's still a bit too much overlap and so on, right? And a bit too much randomness in certain things. Yeah, Warwick, I'm coming for you. So that's something that we definitely want to improve, right? That we just make it really addicting, right? Like in terms of, oh, I want to do this thing because then I get this thing that I absolutely need, and then I need to do this other thing and so on. So that's basically the plan. There's a lot of things that we generally have planned, so that when you play the campaign, you will very much feel like, yeah, but I've barely seen the game yet, right? That kind of thing. I've also, by the way, let me answer this question. I don't know if it comes up, but I've also seen some people being confused about, because our current max level is level 30, and some people think, well, that's just generally what will happen at 1.0 and so on, right? But that's obviously not the case. Like, hey, we'll have a much higher maximum level. And so obviously, and we need that, right? So in order to kind of like throw more challenge at the player and so on for the end game, the max cap will obviously be way increased, which also means more item tiers and so on.
Boom, leveled up off of gathering. I love it.
Question.
Thanks, guys, for the 13 likes.
Blast from the past for us, but will there be a new game plus or rebirth as a part of Endgame?
Yeah, so I don't want to talk about it yet, but that's something that we have been heavily discussing. Let's leave it there.
They talked about it on a podcast, so yeah, the idea is that you would get some benefit.
Is, with the way Wicked is set up and so on, it's not that easy for us. So it's not necessarily like NG Plus is not necessarily the thing that we want to do, right? We think Rebirth is one of the ways to do that. But how we go about it will be different, and people will just have to wait and see how we pull it off.
All right. Next question. Do you plan to add more dynamic events in the world? So enemies attacking Sacrament, bosses roaming in the world, like groups doing raids and stuff like that, or new zones temporarily unlocked.
Enemies attacking Sacrament. Let's go.
So that has always also come up, right? Like even from the side, like I'm from Austria, and obviously with an ARPG, I always thought, man, it would be massively cool. Like every year on the 5th of December in Austria, we have Krampus Day, and when I was a kid, it scared the shit out of you, right? Because you had these devils walking around in the street and like beating up people and so on, right? And I thought that would be so fun, right? Like to have something like that in the game, right? Where it's like, hey, it gives you, like, everybody knows that day is coming up, right? And then, you know, there's certain Krampuses scattered around Isola Sacra on that day, and you can go and defeat them on that particular day and then get their loot and so on, right? And then other players would see you with that loot and know, oh, you've, you know, got this really unique gear that you could only grab on this day and so on. So you're probably a vet that played for a while already and so on. So that stuff is definitely interesting. We did some stuff on the back end already to allow for that. And some of that stuff you've already seen with Finlay only coming in certain days and so on, right? But yeah, there's definitely a lot of interest there for us to expand that.
Looks like someone also asked if there's going to be stuff like rare spawns and stuff that just kind of dynamically appear in the world as events.
Like enemies, you mean?
yeah, just like super rare enemy types or something.
That's
but like
funny, man.
more just like, you know, random like surprise spawns.
Yeah, so that's with Evgeny. Obviously, the typical things have always come up, right? Like, hey, the treasure goblin and those kind of things, right? Michael already did some amazing concepts for the various mimics that we could have in the game and those kind of things. And then just generally bosses and these and so on, right? we'll have to see, right? Obviously, that's the ultimate plan, right? That we always will have some crazy stuff that we'll have in the game. And I mean, that kind of like goes back to the first question that we had here, right? With like, will we keep expanding and updating and so on? Obviously, we will. We are an ARPG, right? Like even when games like Diablo 4 and Path of Exile and so on come out, right? The idea is one of the nice things is that, they're still updating those games, that, the game that you're playing will still get new content and so on, right? And I always loved that idea, even since I was a kid, right? Like when I was young, I always had this really good friend of mine and I played, things like A Link to the Past, right? And I always had this idea of like, hey, when you're in Kakariko, there was always on the far west side of Kakariko, there was just a wall of trees. And I always thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could find the way somewhere to get to the west side of that, right? And as a kid, I did not understand that, there's nothing there, right? Like there's no data there. Nobody ever did anything with that, right? To me, it was just, and that's the beauty of a kid's mind. It was just opportunity, right? Like, hey, some way you would have to be able to get over there and there should be something there and so on, right? And these days with the tech and with all the stuff that we have, right, we could actually realize that vision, right? And have the kids of today actually go nuts about that, right? Like that you wake up in the morning and silently your game has updated and you go back to that one area that you've already been to a million times, but suddenly you find the other way to get to the spot. That there's something magical about that. So obviously we always, want to look into this stuff and so on. Let me, because I did see there were also some questions, and I'm getting to that point now, right, where it's like first boss and stats and so on. So let's already dive into
Job system, baby. Let's talk about it.
Let me choose up for a second.
Yeah, if you're talking, you got to drink.
Let me dive into what we have planned regarding stats, job system, those kind of things, right? So we kind of like answer some of these questions already. I'll just do the broad thing, meaning we have a typical attribute system in Wicked, right? We implemented it because we thought, hey, that's the norm, that's the standard. It's fairly easy to support. People know how to use it. People know how it works. But as we implemented it, right, and as we kind of like saw how people played and so on, the shortcomings of attribute systems kind of like became apparent, right? And I have seen, as I wrote about the class system and try to make people aware that this is an area that we still want to improve, I have seen some arguments and concerns about like, hey, the Soul series used it for 16 years. It can't be that bad, right? But let's actually break it down in design, right? What happens? What is the attribute system about? And what happens if you level up? So the way it works is that we have some main stats, meaning health, stamina, focus, equip load, and so on. And then our like the flex attributes, and then the main attributes with like dex, strength, int, and faith. And what really happens here, all that you can do as a player, right, is that you it's a numbers game. You add percentages to certain attributes, right? Meaning, okay, so if I add health here, right, literally what's happening is, hey, I decide as a player, I want 10% more health, right? So here, for example, I'm going from 100 HP to basically 120 HP. So now I have 20% more HP. And the thing that we've noticed is that we would like to kind of like give players more depth here, while also not giving them too much rope to hang themselves with. And what I mean by that is that our attribute system works a little bit differently than the one you have in Dark Souls and so on. And that came from one of our designers, from Kevin Jordan, who worked on World of Warcraft and so on, right? Because he basically brought up this whole thing of it's not necessarily great if you give people that amount of choice, right? Because even with what we have, we saw some people making pretty horrible builds. And then if you make it more complex, so let's say Dex, for example, right? What a lot of designers do, and what you see in a lot of games, is that Dex is not just, hey, this allows me to use higher tier Dex weapons, but also it makes your attack speed faster and so on, right? These kind of things. And the problem that you have with that is that now you will see a lot of players. Like if you do this kind of stuff right now, you will see a lot of players making mage builds where they put 30 points into decks and then they get extremely frustrated because they have ruined their build. What we've also seen, because we are nuts about ARPGs and so on, right, is that look at how every player these days, you know, has played Path of Exile and Diablo and so on, right? A lot of players are looking at build guides, meaning one player or a couple of players bring out these build guides. They actually do the work. They do the math. They will tell you exactly how it should work, right? Here's how you build a paladin or something, right? And we don't think that's that interesting. The other 80% or so, right, will just basically follow a build guide. So
Yep.
while researching and looking at how can we improve upon that, right? Like how could we give players, like how could we make that more interesting and give that more depth and so on? I stumbled across the Yatsumi Matsuno games again, meaning Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Ogre, etc. And I always loved what he did with Final Fantasy Tactics and the systems behind that and so on. And then my mind went crazy, right? And I was like, oh my God, like I think some of that stuff could be really applicable to Wicked. Meaning the level of experience that you have right now in these games, right? You have the same thing in Souls, Fallout, blah, 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 any of these, you know, games, right? Is, well, it's just a numbers game, right? What the job or the class system will do is that the leveling experience changes in the sense that it's not just about numbers anymore. It's about features, meaning you will still have character traits, because that's what you're basically getting, is character traits. Like as you're leveling up a class, right, you unlock runes and you unlock character traits. And so you will obviously still have character traits that give you more health, more stamina, and so on, right? Those kind of things. But at the same time, we also wanted to have character traits in there that give us a lot more power in terms of design. And basically the players a lot more power in terms of how to create a really interesting build, right? So if you want to play a build that is all about backstabbing and playing an assassin and so on, right? There is stuff that I would have to do for you that I can't do just through numbers, right? If I want you to be able to play more stealthy, where you need actual features, right? Like going invisible and so on, right? I can't do that with a normal attribute system, but I can do that with the class system. So, and the class system works in a specific way, meaning right now, the way we have it designed is that it's based on which weapon you use. The reason why we have it done like based on which weapon you use is because it feels natural, right? Like if you use a certain tool a lot, you will get better at the tool. That's the feeling that you get from it. And the other thing is, well, we don't want you to have to constantly like, hey, I found a weapon that I'd like to use, so now I have to get back to Sacrament and change my class and then warp back to actually use that and so on. That's just interrupting the flow a lot. So we are trying to go for a really smooth experience, right? Where there will be classes, certain classes are there already at the start, certain classes you have to unlock by leveling a little bit into various classes and so on. And then it's just, and then it's like, it's giving you all that power, right? So again, I read all the arguments from people that are saying, oh, but attribute system in Souls games has been done for 16 years. It must be great, right? But I think there's a thought fallacy here on like, hey, because we like Souls games, right? And they're generally really good in a lot of areas, right? That everything is great about it, right? And that's not excuse me, that's not necessarily true, right? Like, I don't think, like, most people play Souls games for a specific reason. They don't necessarily play it because the leveling experience is that much fun, right? Or because the class system is that deep and so on. And that's what we're trying to play around with. That's what we're trying to basically achieve, right? That we break open those boundaries and just say, okay, we're trying to design the coolest thing that we could imagine and trying to just basically up the fun level even more and more and more instead of, it's just a fairly shallow numbers game. Do people understand that?
I think I do. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
I hope that gets it across. But obviously this is fairly complex, so I think a lot of people will just have to wait and see how it plays out. But that's basically what we're implementing right now already. And I have a lot of confidence that ultimately it'll just be the better system. So actually we should decide on which build we're playing. Actually, let me grab Blood-Rusted Sword.
Just an extension of kind of what you talked about, because there was a question on the top list similar to that. How many classes do you plan on adding to the class system?
40, I think,
right
is their
now,
goal.
the way we're going about it is, and let's just add some to equip load. Right now, the way we're going about it, this is still a conversation we have. Literally discussed this again with our system sync team yesterday. My pitch and what I want to go for is that the class is defined by the weapon type, meaning ultimately I had 40. And that sounds crazy, right? That sounds fucking bananas that we have 40 different classes in an ARPG. But in many ways, because of how Wicked is laid out and because a weapon is designed a very specific way, like when I lay out the weapons and I see them in the item manager and I design the movesets and so on, I already have a very specific playstyle in mind for the most part. So that makes it the easiest for me, right? There are some voices in the studio that would like to combine that, right? So that warrior is not just this weapon, but multiple and so on, right? And we'll have to see in terms of UX and so on, right? We're always just trying to design everything fairly modularly and easy to expand and change around. Because as a designer, one thing that I learned is that you never quite know until you actually implemented it, right? Meaning a lot of times you come up with this really cool concept and design that you are super proud of, that you on paper really like, but then you implement it and oops, it actually doesn't work the way you thought.
Oopsie daisy.
And so at Moon we're generally always extremely implementation focused. So something isn't really, or isn't getting approved before something is implemented, right? Like proof is in the pudding always. Chris, shall we move on with next question?
Yep. Grab another one here. So this one's back to co-op. How will co-op work if one player is over-leveled? Will they be scaled down, etc.?
No. So, and that's for... Oh, Jesus Christ. And that's for power reasons. We don't want to disrupt that feeling of Jesus, it's really hard to play and think at the same time. But we don't want to interrupt that in terms of power reasons, right? Meaning, I don't want the feeling to be, hey, I spent all that much time leveling and upgrading my gear and doing all of this stuff. And then I play with my friend and suddenly the enemies that I defeated yesterday with 2-3 hits now take again like 5, 6, 7 hits, right? That's why we don't... Are people laughing about me because I died?
Yeah. It seems Patrick started a death counter.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to have Patrick also play. Patrick is one of our programmers in the team who's one of those geniuses. But god damn you, Patrick. I wanted to see how difficult it is to kind of like discuss everything and so on and play at the same time.
All right, so moving on to another one. Combat update. So they're asking if the combat update will include like more combos, different attacks, weapons. They're also saying a lot of weapons right now are missing things like run attacks, or some weapons have charge attacks, etc. So are we planning on adding more stuff during the combat update?
I mean, that's always ongoing. So generally, we have also analyzed the data. Like literally in our item manager, we can now see which are the most popular weapons and which are less used and so on, right? Which then gives us the power to say,
the power.
Why are some of them not that much used, right? And probably that boils down to
stat system, perhaps.
And what rooms does it have assigned, and those kind of things, right? So obviously the goal is the less powerful weapons we always want to take a look at, right? Because ultimately we would want every weapon to feel viable and really good. And it's always an ongoing thing. So we always have combat designers that work on this stuff, right? So it's literally me kind of like working on movesets and so on. We are currently doing a lot of work on runes to ensure that, like, one of the things that I don't love about our runes right now is that they're extremely attack focused. Meaning a lot of them are just about like, hey, here's this swirl or that kind of thing, right? And we need to bring more variety into that and just generally like add more runes that allow you to play in a strategic way, that allow you to defeat enemies in a way that is not just about, hey, I hit them and that kind of thing, right? But that it's also that it also opens up more different play styles, that you could also do debuffs and all those kind of things, more utility runes, more of that stuff, more traps and so on. And a lot of the runes, the stuff that we've been planning, I mean, you guys have only seen tiers 1 to 3, and the more advanced stuff was always planned for tier 4, 5, 6, etc. Meaning, to some degree, what we did right now was very much intentional, that it's, you know, that it's this set. But the more advanced stuff and so on obviously also comes with the more advanced weapons, meaning that there will be more magical moves and so on. Even with melee sets, there will be more moves that allow a two-handed build, two-handed greatsword build, for example, to counter the slowness and so on that they have and so on. And all of that, also we have to think about PvP and so on, right? There need to be openings, openers and so on, and counters to everything. So the runes tackle a lot of that kind of like design space. I see some, we have some Italians in the chat.
Think just because you felled the beast, you're an ally.
Guys, regarding classes, we are still defining that. This is literally like we're sitting on that right now, right? Our final number of like which classes do we have. Obviously, some classes that you might want will only drop after 1.0.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The nature of the
What I've been saying.
But we'll have to see, right? We are just trying to do our best to kind of like have a really good variety in there, so that, you know, potentially there's something there for everybody. But obviously this is the kind of area where we will always want to expand stuff and like react to how do people feel and what other playstyles would they like to have in the game and so on and so on.
I thought you'd be taller.
I'll take this question out of the chat just because I think a lot of people have asked about it since I feel like since we launched the game. But do we have plans for a transmog system where people can change to
I'm torn on this.
That has come up so many times. So
I'm torn.
I mean, obviously, if you guys are asking for stuff many times, right? Like, so one of the things that I just pulled from the wish list to, yeah, we should do that, is that we give you the option to kind of like hide certain items, like if you don't want to see your helmet on your character, right? That is something that we could do fairly easily. Transmog, I've always kind of like been against it to some degree because of PvP, because of some of the stuff that we have planned, right? Because you don't want to get that feeling of like, hey, I'm playing against this really quick cloth-based character that's using light gear, and then suddenly he has the values, you know, or the stats that you would see in a character that has blade gear and so on, right? There's some inherent weirdness there. But in terms of the armor archetypes that we have, right? Cloth, leather, mesh, plate. We could do it in that sense, but it's still on wish list, so we'll have to see. If you really want transmog, then just beat the drums in our Discord and so on, and we'll hear you.
Looks like the chat's already screaming for transmog too.
I'm seeing probably limit transmog to same equipment type. Then yes, that's what I just said, right? Like that's something that we could think about. Again, it's not like the highest priority item that we have on the list right now, right? But if people really want that stuff, then we might just tell Patrick to do something about it.
Let's see if that's any better.
It really irks me that I died. I don't even know how that happened.
We must accept God's embrace, or we will all
Sorry, Patrick.
end up like that wretched thing.
All right. Another question. Will the story be linear all the way, or will we have choices to shape it? So I think they're thinking of like, you know, you'd have the option to do two different types of things, and it will lead to a different outcome or change the world in some way.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously it will not be Baldur's Gate, right? Like that has even come up during the Ori days and so on, right? Where we always had to kind of like make the difficult decision of like, hey, how do we tell our story? And I've always been more on the side of, hey, it's already really hard to tell one really good story, right? Imagine you would have to write an epic fantasy saga like a Lord of the Rings or a Song of Ice and Fire, and now write it with like 8 different endings, right? And, you know, 60 different outcomes or something, right? That's really hard to do. And so we already have so much stuff to do in the game that's never really been, you know, something that I wanted to focus on. To me, it's always, let's make sure we tell the story that we want to tell, and we tell it extremely well, right? And some of that stuff, I think you've seen in Ori, right? That if we, like with Wicked, the thing is, like we are trying to kind of like create this epic fantasy saga, right? But the problem with that is that it takes some time to introduce everything, right? So that's basically what you're seeing with Wicked right now, that a lot of what we're doing right now in terms of story is still set up and introducing those characters and so on, right? So if you want the analogy, to me, I see what we have with Wicked right now very much like the Fellowship of the Ring, right? Where it's about what are hobbits and what is the whole premise of the story and so on. And that's basically where we're in right now. But I mean, I've just heard the final pitch for the 1.0 experience, like, and the team has now as well, the rest of the team, like a week ago or so.
Sweet.
And we will be doing some pretty incredible stuff. But what we did discuss is that within the side quests, there's a lot that we can do. So the main story, we are not planning to do the Baldur's Gate experience, right? Where it's like, oh, there's tons of different outcomes and this and that, because that's just not the game that we're making, right? But what we are focused on is telling a really goddamn good story, where you care about the characters, where we'll make you cry, we'll make you laugh, and we will tell a really good story. And we took time to basically write the book before we went and started actually even just making the game, right? Like Wicked has actually been a game that I wanted to make since right after Ori and the Blind Forest. I remember being in a meeting with Microsoft where we literally had, you know, that discussion with them of like, hey, what's the next thing that we want to do? And I don't know if I showed them a prototype at that point, but I basically already told them that, hey, I have this idea about doing an ARPG. And that was already a choice back then. Should we do Wicked right after Blind Forest and not do an Ori sequel? But then the team convinced me that, hey, we should really do the Ori sequel, because there was some stuff with the Ori games with Blind Forest where we had to cut certain things or couldn't do certain things because of budget and so on, right? And so ultimately the decision was made that, yeah, we are working on an Ori sequel, we can do all the things, like we can perfect it. Mark Coates, our executive producer, was the person who really ultimately convinced me that we should go ahead and do that. Me and Gennady, obviously. But Wicked is a game that I wanted to make for a long time, right? And that gave us also the time to kind of like, it was always Thomas's little side project for quite some time, where we could just perfect it and work on it and already kind of like do a lot of the story right up and so on, even before we started production, right? So we developed a ton of it before everything, before we even started production.
Forgive me.
And I can't wait to see, like, I mean, for you guys, the story and these characters and so on, right? Like, we are basically at the beginning, right? But internally, we already know where these journeys are heading, right? And we already know where all of that is going. So it'll be really interesting. Like that's always that's the coolest thing about development. And if you tell a story in a game, right, that you see people going through these moments that you worked on for such a long time, and then having them react in a certain way and emote in a certain way, right? That's what every artist wants. Like if you really can get an emotional reaction from people and get them really invested into characters and so on, that's just, there's magic in that.
My outfit encountered a group of raiders as we came ashore on your coast. We sent all of them to rejoin God, save one. I thought she might be of particular interest to you.
I think there's a question in chat that actually matches one of the ones that were asked for a lot. But do we have a timeline for 1.0, and what kind of things do we are we planning for up to 1.0 and after?
I think timeline people probably mean roadmap, right?
Yeah, something like a roadmap.
Yeah. Before we answer that, we should also quickly go over the cinematics, right? Because that's also another thing that we spend so much time on. We literally have some of the craziest Disney animators working on this and so on, right? Like we have Daniel Paische is our cinematics director, who's been working with Glen Keane, if people are familiar with that name, right? Glen Keane was the animator of Ariel and so on. It's just, you know, crazy animator legend. And Danny is basically that for Moon Studios. He's directing all these things. We actually have a really cool behind-the-scenes video coming up where he's basically explaining how shots like that are directed and so on. Regarding the roadmap, let's get into that.
Roadmap!
So yeah, we've just been discussing that, right? Like, we are doing this right now because we wanted to start doing things in a more official manner, right? That's what people have been asking for quite some time now. That we should...
Is there anything else we can do?
Improve our communication channels and so on. What you've seen us recently doing is, hey, we now have the publisher page at the website, right? And we are starting to get things in motion. We hired a marketing team and so on. We're starting to get things in motion so that people get that information kind of like blasted to them everywhere, right? Because we're such a small indie studio, and for a long time it was just the simplest thing for us to just jump on Discord and say, hey, here's the, whatever, a couple thousand people or so, and we'll update them, and then, you know, word will spread, right? But that's one of the things where we needed to improve, and so we've that is in motion now. And so the same thing is true with the roadmap and those kind of things, right? That's basically just the communication, outside communication, and that is coming. Obviously, we've been laser focused for quite some time now
After
on
co-op, I
just
think.
delivering the breach update and then the breach refined. So that took a little bit of a back burner, and then basically I'm currently sitting on just literally looking at every single task that needs to get done for multiplayer and then for the development plan. And I've been sitting on this for a while, and once we have that, that's where we break it up and make it all official. So yeah, it's coming, but give us a little bit of time to kind of like make it official and to approve everything so that it's not just crap that then will get done and etc. And we have to revise our schedules and that kind of stuff.
I think you'll see that sometime after the multiplayer update goes live, and I'm estimating 6 to 8 weeks for multiplayer.
Follow up to that, I think a few people asked is 1.0 going to have the full story in it, or is there going to be like story coming out after?
I mean, the full story, right? So it will definitely, like, it's the full campaign. It's what we had always planned for the first part of our story. It'd be obviously, like, we will not end on a crazy cliffhanger or something, right? But I would want people to see 1.0 to be the first part of a season, right? Or the first part of, like, or something like the Fellowship of the Ring, right? So it's not the full saga yet. And to just quickly explain to people who haven't heard me saying that yet, right? Like, basically what happened with Wicked was that, again, we had some time to kind of like write all this stuff and like basically create this crazy fantasy world before we even started production, right? And so I just went to town on it and built the whole architecture. I don't even know what I'm putting in the chest. But I built basically this architecture and so on, right? And then when Will of the Wisps finished and we try to break it all down, it became quite apparent to us that that the scope that I had planned out would be quite massive. So we basically broke it up into, hey, this is really a saga, and we should break it up that way, right? I think a similar thing happened to George Lucas when he wrote the Star Wars films, right? Where it's just, hey, you can very quickly get you into a thing where if you try to create not just the story for one game, right, but for a fantasy saga, right, that you overscope it. And I think that also happened to me. And so the idea is, yeah, it's going to be a full story. It's going to be the full campaign. It's going to be really satisfying. I think people are going to lose their shit if they see the kind of moments that we have in there, because that's where we really get to play. Meaning, a lot of times, like after the build-up is done, that's where you can then do the really interesting stuff with your characters, right? Once people already know what the characters' motivations are and what their setups and premises are and so on, right? That's where you then jump in and do, like, throw the curveballs and have them go through conflicts and trials and tribulations and all of this stuff, right? So it'll be that. Obviously, there will be more story after we ship 1.0 because we have a lot planned. But I think people will be quite satisfied with the story that we'll tell.
A moment. If I might bend your saw how you
And Thomas, I think you dropped the map, right, for like the areas that are going to be included in 1.0 like a while ago.
Yeah, so I basically I showed the big
repost it for you guys.
collision mesh. Yeah, so I wanted to clear that up, right? So what we had planned, or what we have planned for 1.0 will be another huge expansion of Wicked, in the similar vein to what we did with the Breach and so on, right? Where it's like, hey, it will, like, the whole overworld will be expanded, and there's way more connections. Certain zones that you've been to before will have all new content in it, and so on, right? I think there was a little bit of confusion on, like, is it the entirety of Isola Sacra right away and so on, right? No. There is stuff that we will hold back for further expansions and so on, because the idea is that we release 1.0, but then we also need to keep certain things in the bag for future updates, content, DLC, and so on, right? And that also gives us the time to kind of like then work on the huge expansion, basically what would become the second No Rest for the Wicked, but as an expansion, as a huge update.
As expansion,
I hope
baby.
that didn't confuse people more, but that's the idea. Like with 1.0, to me, it's more about value proposition than just pure sheer size of the world, right? Because what I've seen a lot of times, like it's less now, but I've seen this a lot, right? Is that for a long time, game developers have kind of advertised their games with like, hey, our map is 30,000 square meters big, and then the next game developer came out, that's nothing, ours is 60,000 square meters big, right? And ultimately, as a designer, it's always cringeworthy to hear this kind of stuff, right? Because
agreed,
really,
Chris.
It is about how much of that stuff is actually designed, how much of that stuff is actually fun. So to me, when I think about this stuff, it's about the value proposition. How many fun hours do I get out of a game? And even now, I think the value proposition that we have on Wicked is pretty okay. You know, like the early access is $40, and most people, what we've seen from the telemetry, already spent like 40 to 70 hours. Obviously, that number will go way up as 1.0 comes out, right? So I'd be quite satisfied if people spend 100+ hours on the game, and then we just keep increasing that number with further updates, with further expansions, and so on. That's the goal. That's the idea. It's not necessarily about, you know, like how, like, let's make the biggest map in the world. To us, it's always quality comes above quantity, right? And some things will hold back so that we can you know, filled it up with updates and so on. And some stuff wasn't even planned really for 1.0, but I showed the entirety of Isola Sacra just to show people ultimately this is what we'll have, right? Like here you will be able to play the entirety of that thing. That's the goal.
Anything you come across for yourself, you can find there was.
So, Irv asked,
This is
there
a
gonna be
little
way
bit
to
of a
lock
weird one, but
items?
also
Oh,
managed to
second.
get quite a few
Sorry.
upvotes. Will we see more colorful armor? Because right now, most things are like red and green are most prevalent. But it would be good if we had something like more like purplish, blue, orange, etc.
I saw that message and I kind of like had to laugh as well because I didn't even consciously notice that. So here's how it goes. Basically, we have this amazing art director, Michael, and he's basically laying out the vision for literally what everything looks like in Wicked. And so I haven't looked at it through that lens of like, hey, do we have all the colors in the rainbow available for our armor sets? But that's definitely a really interesting idea. Like, we should do that, right? Like, we should look at, is there too much of, hey, all these armors are green or so, right? The other thing that always comes up with this is dying, right? And I don't know if I pronounced this correctly. I don't mean death, I mean dyeing your clothes. And that is currently a wishlist item. Oh, here's Alden. That's currently a wishlist item, but that I think would be really cool. Like one of the things that we have always discussed, and we are currently in the process of expanding Sacrament, as you might imagine. The city is already quite complex, but we're expanding that even further, and let's get this quest while we're at it. We're expanding that even further and adding all the things that we always wanted to have in Sacrament, because farming and all those things are part of that, right? But one of the things that always came up is, hey, it would be cool to have a barber in town, right? So that, hey, if you played a character for quite some time and you're not happy with your looks anymore, that you could actually change your looks. And part of that could also be that, hey, this is where you get to change the colors of your armor and so on. So if we could integrate that, I think that's nice, but it's a wishlist item right now.
And thanks, guys, for the 20 likes. I appreciate that. Regarding locking items, they talked about
That someone in the chat asked
same thing
if
with
we can get
buyback.
more armor or helmets specifically that don't cover the entirety of your face so that they can like see their customization and stuff.
I mean, we'll have all kinds of helmets in the game anyway, right? So, and I think if we add the option of, hey, you can actually hide helmets if you're not, if you want to see the character's face or something, I think we're good there.
I guess this is kind of a good one. Will we see any new content in the co-op update?
Give us a date, please.
Content in terms of new areas, no. So we are holding some stuff back. We are already working on that super heavily. I'm obviously reviewing that all the time. But there will be new things. So obviously we are steadily marching towards 1.0. And every department is working, burning the midnight oil and getting more and more stuff into the game, right? So obviously we also want to make sure that, hey, the content update for people that aren't interested in multiplayer, that they also get something out of it, right? That people should be excited every single time about an update instead of just a certain group, right? So there will be new things, but we're not releasing right now more story updates and so on with this particular patch.
I think something that kind of falls into that, but also some stuff that we already discussed before. But one of the most requested questions is like, what percentage of the game are we at now in terms of like now compared to 1.0, basically? I guess in terms of content, story, that kind of thing.
I mean, that's really hard to say because we're currently basically not planning it out, but we're basically putting it in and implementing it. We'll have to see. That's not an answer I can answer right now. And again, like, I don't think it's necessarily about what's the percentage, right? It's about how much fun is there, and that's kind of like how I think about it as a designer, right? Like, how many really fun hours do I get out of this thing until I feel satisfied? And that's the thing that I'm focusing on. Just making sure that players get a crazy amount of fun out of Wicked.
Yeah, for those in chat asking for a rough estimate, it's kind of hard to compare because of the fact that like the game, while we do have somewhat of a linear story, the content itself that we add into the game isn't linear. So we could add like more bounties and challenges and stuff as we think of them up, and like we're constantly questioning what kind of things we can add to the game that would like add replayability, make it more fun. So it could really vary, really depending on like what we add to 1.0.
And there's other modes and so on coming, right? So it's like we're trying to do it from a perspective of just not looking at it in terms of like the game being linear, right? But just adding more and more and more fun to it. So it's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, we got to think about also like Crucible and stuff, and like the other Crucible modes. Like there's going to add a lot of like more fun time and stuff. So
endgame modes, etc.
Yeah. Actually, that actually ties into the next question, which is it correct to assume that each statue in the Crucible that we currently have will be a different like challenge, different room, different enemies, bosses, etc.?
Yeah, exactly. That was always the idea, right? So the first one that you have right now is just the first one, right? And then the idea was always with the Crucible that we can do the things that wouldn't necessarily fit into the campaign, right? So in the campaign, it's hard to kind of like, put a roguelite mode thing in that makes total sense in terms of the story and so on. But the Crucible is perfect for that. So for example, one of the statues we always wanted to do kind of like horde mode. It's what Evgeny kind of like termed it. And that plays similarly to kind of like Vampire Survivors and those kind of things, right? So it's all about different modes and kind of like just adding tons and tons of fun to the game. Meaning the experience that you have right now is the typical roguelite thing, right? Like obviously we'll add more stuff to that as well. But then the other mode is, just waves of enemies come at you. How long can you sustain? Then there was another one where it was all about really playing with the ARPG formula, right? And what you have with the ARPG formula in many ways right now is how long does it take you to kind of like level up, right? And how long does it take you to go through a season and so on? And one thing I always loved is that at the end, and Zelda, by the way, did this really smartly in one of the, in Breath of the Wild, right? With that, I forgot the name of it, that island where you start naked and then you go through that whole experience again in a short period of time. And that was the idea there as well, right? That you have a dungeon where you can basically play super long, but you go through the leveling experience, the ARPG experience of like, okay, you start actually at level 1 in that particular mode and then level up and go through the whole ARPG experience in a shorter time. That was the idea, that we add those kind of things, that we kind of like go crazy with that, because we built a lot of these systems already, right? And want to kind of like have fun stuff to explore and kind of like really challenge a lot of the ARPG stuff, right? And just add a shit ton of fun to it. And these kind of like experiences that wouldn't fit in Overworld, but make total sense if you think in terms of Crucible. Krish, what's the next one?
Okay, so will cities like Tyr and Havenport function similarly to Sacrament, such as rebuilding parts of the city, upgrading vendors, owning property in the city limits, etc.?
That's the idea. The idea is, well, we want the cities to all feel really cool, right? Obviously, it always comes up like the housing thing, right? I knew when we do the Marion Village, right, that people would immediately ask for housing. I'm not gonna say a thing
I
on
want
that
housing
because,
for that.
for reasons. But yeah, we want every town to feel really cool, right? Like the idea, the design goal with Wicked was always we wanted to create a game or an RPG where it's not about, hey, there's 30 different towns, right? Because that's what I see in a lot of these RPGs, right? Where it's just, hey, there's 30 towns. And by the way, I don't remember the name of a single NPC in those towns. And that always struck me as strange, right? Because if you look at Diablo 1 had one town. And you still remember, Griswold the Smith and Pippin the Healer and so on, right? And so we followed a similar design principle where we wanted to do, again, quality over quantity, right? Instead of doing 30 towns, I wanted to do one and then really go deep with that. You know, like one town is cool, but with Haven, Port, and T and so on, right? Like that would follow the same idea that
Yeah,
you know,
you're
there's
going
a
to
lot
see
of
more
steps there.
towns.
The structure of those,
I don't
and the
know if
architecture
1.0
of
makes
those
sense.
needs to be completely different.
there is
It
still the
completely
mainland.
different, and it's just massively cool, right? But they should all be extremely different from one another and unique. And you know, again, quality over quantity is the name of the game. There. Oh Jesus Christ! It's so hard to play and
Yes.
I died twice already. That's crazy. Glad we didn't do hardcore mode. Actually, let's grab an armor that is not bad, and let's actually give me a second to not play stupidly.
Got it.
Okay, let's try that.
And Good Cough asked if there are more secrets like the Balakta one that we have where you have to like emote and stuff in the game. And I mean, you have to play to find out, but we do have more plans, more stuff that we want to add. That's like,
Yeah, for sure.
You have to kind of like, run around and find.
I always love that thing. Like, I'm obviously a huge Nintendo nerd, right? And love what they're doing, right? And I talked to Ken Lobb back then a lot. Like, I really appreciated when Microsoft invited us, and then I got to talk to Ken Lobb. If people don't know, Ken Lobb is the guy, like, he worked at Nintendo in the early 90s and helped with a bunch of their stuff and so on, and was literally the reason why the club in GoldenEye was called that, right? That was basically an abbreviation of his name. And got Rare back then to do the multiplayer in GoldenEye and all those things, right? And he told me the story of like, well, that's the thing how Shigeru Miyamoto always annoyed his entire team, right? That he would come in and play the games at the very end of production and still ask for, can we add this secret here? And can we add this here? And can we add that here, right? And I always adapted that. It makes so much sense. It's like the logical thing to do, right? That you, as you play the game and, you know, you're getting closer to release, but we're seeing, oh my God, wouldn't it be cool if we add something here behind this waterfall, right? And would we, you know, we could do still this crazy thing here, right? Like that shouldn't be too hard to do and so on, right? And so, yeah, we want to add as much as possible.
Yeah.
That's actually
that level
one
up
of
is
the
so
regrets
satisfying.
that I have with Ori. And that's part of the reason why we went with a different model for No Rest for the Wicked, was that with Ori I always felt like I would have loved, with both games, to have even just a month more time at the end to add more secrets, to, you know, like make areas that we couldn't finish, and so on, and to bring that in, right? And it never made any sense. Like, we never really got the chance to do that. And now with Wicked, the thing that I love about it, and the thing that I love about us going early access and going with this model, is that it allows us to do those things, right? And in some ways, we already did this, right? Like, we already went and added extra things to levels that you guys had already played, but now we added extra things to it and so on. And adding crazy secrets and so on is always one of the things that we really enjoy. I remember I had this, I even had, I think, David back then. I had him look into, we had an area in Ori that I wanted the player to be able to open if they would say a certain thing into the microphone. Like, the player would actually have to say that into the microphone. And obviously we never got that done, we never got that in, but those kind of things, like, I just love adding crazy things like that.
Let's give you a second here while you're double fighting at the moment.
Yeah, I should upgrade my weapons and so on. I'm
got
playing
speared.
so stupidly
Wow.
right now, like, it's
What a
embarrassing. Because, yeah, it's hard to play and, you know, properly and talk at the same time and so on.
No, I haven't, Savage. One of the things I thought about.
Yeah, let me actually warp to Sacrament for a second and upgrade some gear and so on and see what we can do. But yeah, feel free to ask your question. Now I'm I got fucking murdered anyway.
Yeah, but
Okay,
they're really
so
good. I just
let me
never
ask
got around to
one
it,
that's a
you know?
little bit further down here. What's Moon's official stance on using mods to substantially alter the game mechanics, such as using the free rerolls mod, stuff like that, especially with multiplayer coming?
I mean, I love mods, right? But there's a difference between modding and cheating, right? So cheats we don't love because we do want to add kind of like, global leaderboards and those kind of things, right? And if people cheat, that basically cheapens the experience. But modding itself, I mean, knock yourself out, right? The only problem that you'll probably face is that, hey, we built Wicked on a foundation that... Let me actually sell some stuff here that I don't want to use. That makes it a little bit like we built it on this quantum network layer, and that will probably make it a little bit difficult to do mods, right? But the team doesn't necessarily have anything against it. The only thing is cheating. Actually, let me remove this one. I don't like this armor set. Let's remove this one as well. Yeah, so that's our stance on it.
All right, next one. I actually think it's kind of interesting. Any chance we can get a Druid playstyle? So something more like nature magic,
Yeah,
spirits,
I
animal
love a
companions, that
Druid.
kind of thing.
Yeah, people always want that. I mean, the shape-shifting and so on. If we do something like that, I would want to do it right. And I don't... That is not currently planned. Obviously, it doesn't mean that it's never coming, right? But for 1.0, it's not on the plan. There's other things that have higher priority. But obviously, if it's not now, right, then we could add that with further updates, expansions, and so on.
It looks like
Is it on my end or is he frozen? I guess anybody in chat still? Everything on my end looks like it's working. Unsure. Hopefully you guys can, there we go. Their aim is to ambitious with the games. Curious if they're getting too much funding. Post. Thanks so much, dude. Yeah, I think I think it's that, Ori sold incredibly well. Originally they had their publisher, they bought the rights back, but I think they did have money. They've sold, I think, a really good amount of the game. But obviously game sales mean much. That's why we've been doing giveaways. We gave away a copy to somebody who never heard of the game before today. And so hopefully they're gonna rock and freaking roll. You hit refresh.
it's just
Okay. Comes after us
back.
having added pets.
Strange.
Then people will probably want mounts and so on, right?
I think even like internally in our dev chats, as soon as we added the petable animals, immediately everybody was asking for pets. So
yeah,
I love pets. I think that'd be great. Whether it's just collection.
That's
or
one of the
whatnot.
nice things that I love about Wicked, though, right? Even when I did the initial prototype of Wicked, I was the same. I added crazy things to it, right? Like I even had like a tower defense mode that I added with Robin back then, and just went crazy and so on. And it just very quickly became apparent that, hey, if we build this game this
Post,
way,
I like how you're still number one.
that this could be so much
I don't
fun,
know
like, because
how
it's
their
not
ranking
just like
works.
there's so many things that we could add that would just expand the game. That would be really fun. That could be really, really cool, right? Like, so even with what we have right now, right? Like with the Crucible and the stuff that we are planning and so on, like in my designer mind, there's really no reason why the Crucible can't be one of the best roguelite games out there, right? And that would just be one thing in the game. Same thing with PvP, for example. Like Wicked is designed, the underlying design is no different than... Do I have the key already? The underlying design is no different than what you would have in a fighting game and so on. So the PvP aspect, for example, as we went through development, we always try to make sure that we don't make the mistakes that I saw being done before. So when I was working at Blizzard, for example, one of the things with Diablo 3 was that the PvP never really made any sense, right? Because it had all these mechanics in there. that would make sense for PvP. And so throughout development, I basically always asked the team, you know, that they should always test this stuff and so on in the PvP mode to make sure that our combat makes sense, and so that we don't kind of like back ourselves into a corner where we then can't do that. But that's the really, really cool thing that I love about Wicked, right? And you know, that we can add all these things that basically almost turn into different games. And by the way, I mean, one of the things that I've been recently doing is, and let me actually share that because that's a cool thing for people to know, is that one of the things that I've been experimenting with, we had a little bit of time now to be experimental, and basically as we plan things out for 1.0, we had the tech team already work on a lot of their multiplayer stuff, right? And in my after hours and so on, I just did a bunch of experimental stuff. That's also where the third-person camera stuff and so on came from, right? And one of the things I wanted to look into is solving the issue that players always brought up, and Patrick was always going on about, which is a lot of players didn't want to join early access, they wrote to us, because they're not interested in story spoilers, right? Like they like the story, and oh my god, I didn't even cook. I'm playing so crazy right now. Let's do this. They're playing. They don't want to play and don't want to join because of story stuff, right? They don't want to get all the story spoiled and everything, and so one of the ideas that we had, even early on, was basically a free roam mode, right? Meaning, because of the systems and because of all the stuff that we already built, we have, you know, everything ready and the scaling and the architecture of the game and so on. But the free roam mode, the first idea was we could just allow the player to basically do a thing where, hey, you basically start in endgame mode, and the world just scales by itself, and has some starting values and so on, right? But I always like the idea of giving players a way to play Wicked in a way they have never played it before. Meaning, hey, I could wake up on the coast, and if I would be so inclined, I could just immediately go to the Black Trench, right? Because right now what we're giving you is a very directed experience. And that then transformed into, you know what? We could probably add a survival thing here, right? Where we could change it up even further, where you would really play it in a completely different way. Meaning, you start on the coast, and then you go out and get some resources, and we change the crafting a bit, and now you're basically playing the map. The quest stuff and the story stuff in that mode doesn't really matter that much anymore, right? But basically meaning, hey, during the day you roam out, you get some materials and so on. During the night, crazy stuff happens and crazy monsters spawn and so on. And now you have to take care of yourself and so on, right? And there's other things that you have to take care of and so on. And I think that stuff is really interesting. And that's what I love about Wicked. The expandability, right? And how much stuff we could add to it. There's this vision, this idea of like the perfect ARPG, right? Or the forever game and so on. And I'm really interested in that, like building the thing that would just get me excited every day about like, hey, playing the game and developing something that feels so different. In many ways, I just also had a call with Chris Wilson from Grindy Gear Games. I wrote him after I had this, an interview with Aaron from Aaron Action RPG, and had a long talk with him because I thought it was so interesting how he did Path of Exile for a decade, and was basically the head of the studio there, and always had to come up with new things and so on, right? And so we had a really interesting discussion. I would love... There's actually something planned, but I don't know if I can talk about that yet, because I don't want to step on anybody's toes. But I would love to, you know, to have people just hear how every designer of the bigger ARPGs out there and so on approaches ARPGs and talks about their vision and so on, right? Because that could be so interesting, because we all approach it from a completely different angle.
Now, sorry, on that note, guys, if you want to continue watching over on Twitch, I do have to get back to work. They originally kind of planned for an hour and a half, and they're definitely over on that metrics, etc. So I do appreciate Thomas. I will have to go back and catch up, and we'll hopefully put together, a general summary of kind of what was talked about. Obviously, we've heard a lot of these answers before because we're following the game as closely as we are, but I think there's some interesting nuggets that he's kind of detailed, and can't wait to share more with you guys as that news gets ready to roll out. Thank you guys for the 30 likes. Thank you for listening. If you made it all the way to the end of this VOD, I wish you guys all the best. Thank you so much for being here. Sound off in the comments with VOD Squad. That's a great way of supporting these live stream VODs after the fact. But beyond that, guys, just going to wish you all the absolute best. Hopefully I will see you next time. But until then, take care.